2020, hosted by the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, or CIPS. This is the 5th webinar that CIPS is hosting in our 4-day Digital Week virtual conference, and I hope you've been enjoying it so far. This morning's session is on security in the cloud, a shift of perspective in cybersecurity. Just to let you know as well, this session is conducted in English, but we are also offering live audio interpretation into Bahasa Indonesia for audiences who prefer Bahasa. English option. So this morning's session is expected to be Sorry, I just got cut off there. My apologies. One moment. Let me just get things in order again. Sorry. So as I was saying, this morning's session is expected to take around 1 hour and 15 minutes, where we will have 40 minutes of presentations from our guest speakers today, and then another half an hour of discussions and Q&A with participants. Just a few more housekeeping notes that if you have any questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A box, not the chat box. And here you are able to vote on the question live webinar sessions. My colleague will share more information on this in the chat box. In addition, for your information as well, we are live broadcasting this on YouTube. And so if you know anybody who would be interested in this topic, feel free to share the YouTube link that my colleague will also share in the chat box. Okay, great. I won't waste more time in the introductions. So to moderate this session, I would like to introduce my fellow colleague and CIPS researcher, Pinkan Audreen. Pinkan, over to you.
Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction. And good morning, everyone, especially all the speakers and also audiences that join us today in the final day of Center for Indonesian Policy Studies Digital Week 2020. My name is Pinkan Audreen, and I'll be moderating for this session. So today's webinar upholding the theme of security in the cloud, a shift in cybersecurity. As we may know, here in Indonesia, the proposed Cybersecurity and Safety Bill, or also known as RUU Keamanan dan Ketahan term. However, as the digital economy grows globally, including here in Indonesia, the House of Representatives included the bill again in the new parliamentary term for 2020 until 2024, national included, to be carried over. So that means Indonesian Parliament will be drafting and begin all the process from the early stage. At the moment, there's an ongoing discourse on how cybercrimes in the digital economy can be prevented and prosecuted in Indonesia. Growing numbers of various types of businesses and industry that invest in the cloud, in complete control over who can access and store sensitive data, facilitate data theft and phishing are just some of the concerning issues that we have, which then leads into the questions related to the cybersecurity, including in the cloud computing. So this webinar, we will explore how the public and private sectors can cooperate to address security concerns in cloud computing, while enabling the growth and also digital economy and innovation. So there are a few questions that might guide our discussion this morning. The first one, how can we actually adopt global cybersecurity standards and certification, while at the same time build a reasonable capabilities to mitigate some of the potentially threat that happen nationally? And also, how could cloud computing works and affected Indonesia's digital economy, and also how the public and private sectors can cooperate for alleviating cyber attack. So to answer all of these questions, we are grateful to have three speakers for today's webinar that ranging from Indonesian government. We have Bapak Anton Setiawan here as the Director of Digital Economy Protection at National Cyber and Crypto Agency, or also known as BSSN for short. And also ICT practitioner, Bapak Tony Seno. And the last one, Mr. Yamki Chan, Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy of Google Cloud for Southeast Asia. Before we begin to hear more explanation about this interesting issue, I would like to remind all of the participants here in Zoom that you can submit your questions from now on using the Q&A feature. And for those who are joining us via YouTube streaming, you can also drop your question in the chat box. So without any further ado, we will begin to hear from our first speaker, Bapak Anton. A short introduction of his works. He was raised in a national coding environment and with a background in scientific mathematics and cryptography, and also has been widely involved in various programs related to cybersecurity. He has experience at home and also abroad institution that brings significant impact in building his managerial capacity, and also in his current position at the BSSN as the Director of Digital Economic Protection. He also has the responsibility as the best. The stage is yours, but you can share. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Finkan. Let the host help me to present my presentation, please. Okay, that's good. Good morning, everyone. On this very good opportunity, let me represent BSSN to thank you for the opportunity given by Center for Indonesia Policy Studies to speak in this webinar. Dear Pak Tony and Mr. Chan, nice to meet you again in this webinar. Also for all participants who already joined with us. The presentation that I will bring is titled Collaboration in Strengthening Cybersecurity. Next. Yeah. Dear all participants, referring to the report that has been published by World Economic Forum related to top 5 global risks in 2019, we can see together that 2 out of 5 global risks are derived from the use of communication and information technology. As we know, the first one is data fraud and theft, and the second one is cyber attack. Also, based on the monitoring carried out by BSSN, we also can see the top 5 dangerous activity that occur in cyberspace as follow. First, Trojan activity. Trojan is the type of malware that it is often disguised as legitimate software. It can be employed by cyber thief or hacker trying to gain access to user to our system. Second is information gathering. This is the act of gathering different kind of information against the targeted victim or system, such as spear email phishing. Both of these dangerous activities right now were very prominent at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Third, we have exploit kit. This is a utility program that attacker used to launch exploit against vulnerable program. Fourth is web application attack, cyber attack against web-based application. And the last one is policy violation. This is about access to illegal website. Next. The role of BSSN is maintaining national cybersecurity in certainly inseparable from the national direction and objective as stipulated in the 1945 Constitution, and also President Jokowi program, called it Nawacita. There are 5 pillars that are focus of BSSN to ensure the achievement of national security and promote economic growth. So the achievement of national security and promote economic growth. The 5 pillars are carried out with the aim of developing of good government and protecting citizens. The first one is human resource development. Second, technological independence. Third, standard, regulation, compliance. The fourth, national synergy and collaboration. And the 5 is readiness and resilience. Next. This is the main of my presentation. BSSN has made 8 collaborative action initiatives involving various elements of stakeholder, ranging from central to local government agencies, academic, industry, society, both national and global level. The 8 initiative as follows. The first one is monitoring. This initiative illustrates how BSSN cooperate with the telecommunication industry to supervise internet traffic in Indonesia. Second, information sharing. This initiative illustrates how BSSN collaborate with various government and private organizations to share information about the vulnerabilities and threat of cyber attack that are happening right now. Regulation and policy. This initiative illustrates how BSSN collaborates with various ministries to develop cybersecurity regulation and policies, one of which is the draft of cybersecurity law. We hope next year it will be come to process in our House of Representatives. The fourth is capacity building and culture. This initiative illustrates how BSSN collaborate with various academic entities and communities to build cybersecurity capabilities, both in terms of research and human resource development, including building a culture of cybersecurity. 5, cybercrime, how we can handle cybercrime. This initiative illustrates how BSSN collaborate with a law enforcement official to deal with a variety of cybercrime. This is increasing that is increasingly prevalent lately, mostly in the COVID-19 pandemic. 6 is a readiness. This initiative illustrates how BSSN collaborate with the central and regional government to ensure readiness in dealing with cyber incident. And next is cyber defense. This initiative illustrates how BSSN collaborate with state defense institutions to ensure in the cyberspace can be protected properly. And the last one is international cooperation. This initiative illustrates how BSSN collaborate with various international institutions for the bilateral, regional, or multilateral to ensure that national interests in the international relation can be in harmony with the interests of nation of the world. All parties can take part actively can take part in the initiative according to their respective authorities, capabilities, and interests. There are a number of initiatives which later become the National Medium-Term Development Program (RPJMN) 2020 and 2024. Namely the development of a national early detection system through the development of National Security Operation Center, as well as the development of the ability to deal with cyber incident through the development of national CERT and CERT at the central and regional government level. This is the 2 initiatives that become the national medium-term development program. And also BSSN together with all stakeholders right now develop a national occupational map and compile Indonesia National Work Competency Standard. We call it SKKNI, Standar Kompetensi Kerja Nasional Indonesia in Cybersecurity. This is a national strategy in the development to build the capacity in the field of cybersecurity. Next. Yeah, cyberspace is formed and run by various parties with various interests. I think we already aware about this. With rule that compile and adhere to collectively. For this reason, I need to emphasize that the task of protecting national cyberspace will succeed if there is a synergy and collaboration from all parties involved. BSSN, in accordance with the presidential mandate number 53 and 133, 2017, is responsible to ensuring that this synergy and collaboration that I already presented, its initiative collaboration, can be realized to protect our cyberspace, to protect our national interest to achieve the national prosperity. That's all, and I'm passing back to Pinkan. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pak Anton, for the brief explanation about the BSSN works and also how cybersecurity being managed in Indonesia. That's a really interesting presentation, especially for the action plan. So we know that there are 8 area of collaborative action that the government actively building for our cybersecurity, and perhaps we can dig deeper into that in our discussion in the Q&A session. And before that, we will give the room for our next speaker, which is Pak Tony Seno, to join and explain more on the cloud computing. He is an ICT practitioner with 30 years of experiences as IT engineer, architect, and CTO in a number of global corporations. And now he is a researcher and ICT expert in several professional organizations, government, and also universities. So without any further ado, for Pak Tony, you can share your presentation with us.
Thank you very much, Bu Pinkan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
I hope my voice can be heard. Good morning, Pak Anton, Mr. Yam Kichan, Bu Pinkan, and everyone. In this short presentation, I would like to present about the cybersecurity in the cloud computing era. So, based on the data from Statista 2019, this is just last year, cloud computing market is growing fast, and there is no sign of slowing down. In the 2020, the market is around $236 billion. So this is because of the cloud computing offers so many benefits compared to the on-premise solutions. For example, it is lower cost, higher scalability, better business continuity, better collaboration, better flexibility, and better automated updates. So those are the benefits of the cloud. But how about the security? Based on the Kaspersky research on 2019, this is also last year, it's around 90% of corporate data breaches in the cloud was caused by the social engineering. So because of the technology advancement, the cloud becoming more and more mature, and the weakness is mostly on the people, on the person itself. So the example of social engineering. Social engineering is exploiting the human vulnerabilities rather than the cloud vulnerabilities. For example, if somebody is surprised of something, then he or she will be in a vulnerable situation. So he tend to trust and he tend to do without checking the fact. So this thing we see everywhere. So just maybe last month, yeah, there is a very big security incident in Indonesia. So 10 of million of Indonesian user ID is stolen because of there is some weakness on the configuration and also the vulnerabilities of the human itself. And next, if we see in terms of if we compare the cloud and on-premise solution, yeah, Kaspersky Lab issues a report that security incidents in public cloud are more likely caused by the customer fault. So this is based on Kaspersky finding. And there is another research also from Nominet on the 2020, did the polling to the 300 professionals in the UK and the US. Nominet found out that most of the business are committed using cloud more, and although important security concerns remain, the risk is now perceived to be comparable to the on-premise system. So yes, everyone believes that there is still a security issue, but the issue is becoming lower and it's comparable to the on-premise system. And the cloud is not only seen as a security challenge. There are many more cloud-based security tools that is used by the security teams to increase their enterprise defense. So the ones that is embracing the cloud solution is not only the consumer, but also the security team in the enterprise. And security professional see that the best security solution is the one that can be integrated with the existing infrastructure, both cloud and on-premise. So there is a tendency that organization implement cloud and on-premise at the same time, and they use a cloud-based solution to secure both of them. In terms of the responsibility, a lot of people forget that the cloud model is a shared responsibility. It's shared responsibility between the cloud. Responsibility is shared. It depends on the model of the cloud. For example, we know there are several models: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and also software as a service. And the responsibility is ranging. In the on-premise model, the responsibility is full on the customer responsibility. But on the infrastructure as a service, the responsibility may be 50%, 50% from the customer and the cloud service provider. But on the software as a service model, the responsibility is more on the service provider because everything is done on the service provider except the administration. However, based on the NSA report, in terms of security, the threat detection, there are three things that we have to consider. The threat detection, the incident response, and the patching and updating. This is related to the security in the cloud. Threat detection is depend on the service model. So for example, the customer responsible of detecting threat to their own cloud resources, because if the customer using infrastructure as a service, basically the virtual machine is owned by the customer and can be fully configured by the customer without the service provider involvement. So it's fully customer responsibility to detect the threat on the virtual machine and above. And the second one about the incident response. This is fully CSP or cloud service provider responsibility, because cloud service provider knows which attack is attacking which part of the cloud infrastructure. And the last one, patching and updating, is depend on the service model. For example, if it is infrastructure as a service, then the cloud service provider responsible to the hypervisor update. But on the virtual machine operating system update, it's the customer responsibility. And based on the NSA report on the 2020, this is just recent, there are several cloud vulnerabilities and mitigation. The first one, so if we see this graph, on the horizontal scale, there is prevalence. And on the vertical scale, there is the sophistication. So there is a lot of security incident happening because of the misconfiguration on the bottom right. Yeah, the users are given certain privilege within the cloud's infrastructure based on their responsibilities in the organization, but these privileges are not configured correctly, maybe because the users lack of training or maybe ignorance or something like that. So the user account may have access to the information that they are not supposed to have access to, while the other maybe have access to the information they need, or maybe they cannot access the information that they need. So this misconfiguration, especially access privilege, it increased the risk of leakage of information in the cloud. And to prevent the users from sharing sensitive information publicly, the organization can implement cloud service policy. So apart from the leveraging the cloud service policies, organizations could also continuously monitor all cloud resources, security events, and configuration changes to detect any misconfigured or misuse of access. So usually the cloud service provider provides tools to the user and the user administration to monitor everything that is happening in their infrastructure. And the second one is the poor access control. So authentication is the main security layer that prevent intruders from getting inside the cloud environment. When this access control mechanism is compromised, the consequence can be very dangerous. So poor access control mechanism can give illegal access to the sensitive information and allows them to change some privilege and destroy the system, or maybe steal some information within the organization. So this need a stronger authentication model to prevent that kind of breaches in the security. So maybe we can use the multi-factor authentication to avoid this thing. The cloud service provider provide that kind of facility, but it's depend on the user whether they want to implement the multi-factor authentication or not. So this is why the weakness of the user is still very very important in the cloud security model. And the cloud security provider can also provide the audit logs. Yeah, so the administrator of the user can look what is really happening today, or maybe last night, or maybe last month, and they can find some pattern, and then maybe they can change some configuration. So this is related to the access control. While the sophisticated attack will attack the cloud provider itself. So for example, the shared tenancy vulnerabilities and supply chain vulnerabilities. In the cloud, everything is shared. So server is shared, resources are shared, networking are shared. So it's one vulnerability in the cloud service provider. If it is slow to be handled, it can be exploited by the attacker. So, but this is very rarely happening because of if there is some vulnerability, usually the cloud service provider will patch it immediately. But there are some possibilities, according to NSA, because of the infrastructure of the cloud is using hypervisor technology. So if there is some hypervisor error or hypervisor weakness that can be exploited, it can cause the shared tenancy vulnerabilities. But the issue here is maybe hypervisor is very stable. It's very hard to find a weakness in the hypervisor. And other technology is container. Container is also the same. It's with the hypervisor. It's very stable, very difficult to find the vulnerabilities inside the container or hypervisor. So that's why it needs a very sophisticated attack to the cloud service provider for them to be able to do the shared tenancy attack. And the last one, according to NSA, is supply chain vulnerability. So this can caused by some bad application in the App Store, something like that, because some bad actor can put bad application in there, and it's up to the user if they are not careful, they can install that kind of application and have their data stolen. So this is also happening, supply chain vulnerability. So it's up to the cloud provider responsibility how to select which one is bad in their supply chain. In terms of threat actors, there are many threat actors with different motivation. This has been mentioned by Pak Anton during his presentation. However, in the term of cloud, according to NSA, there are 4 main actors. The first one is the malicious CSP administrator. So this is someone who works inside the cloud provider and he have a very bad motivation. So there are several things to avoid this. For example, leverage privileged credential or position to access, modify, or destroy information in the cloud platform, and leverage privileged credential to gain access. So this can be done by the CSP administrator. Usually in the cloud service provider, they are very selective to select the administrator for the cloud. They check the background, and they limit the capability of that person. So only certain people can access certain functionality during certain time. So this is what the cloud service provider can do. And the second one is the malicious customer cloud administrator. So this, if some administrator work in the customer side, and he using his privileged credential, he can do everything to access, modify, or destroy information in the cloud platform. The third one is the cyber criminal and or nation state sponsor actors. So they leverage a weakness in the cloud architecture or configuration to obtain sensitive data or consume cloud resources at the victim network. And the fourth one is untrained or neglectful customer cloud administrator. This happening a lot in small organization where they cannot afford a good cloud administrator. They just employ anybody with IT knowledge to maintain the cloud infrastructure. then they don't know what is the priority. They don't know the level of security, and they put a very easy to guess password, something like that. So they can expose sensitive data or cloud resources unintentionally. And related to the cybersecurity and safety law, yeah, this is my wish, in the future, that this law in the future law, because in the past draft cannot be continuous, so we have to start from scratch. So cybersecurity, what I believe, is not a responsibility of one organization only. So this organization must work with multiple stakeholders. It's very important to work with the multi-stakeholders, especially to work with the technology owner, because the technology owner is the one who knows the trend, who knows their technology, and I believe they have the cybersecurity program that can collaborate together. Yeah. So together with the technology owner, this institution can develop a more secure technology in fighting the cybersecurity. So some example of the multi-stakeholder is the government, academia, media, industry, community. Yeah. So since most of the attack is attacking the person, it's social engineering. So it's very important for Indonesian people to understand the cybersecurity, and that's why it's very important to have IT literacy education for everyone in Indonesia, and it's everyone's responsibility. And yeah, that's my idea for the next law. Yeah, I would like to refer to the government of UK. The government of UK issued the Internet Safety Strategy Green Paper, and it's very interesting that they contains of 3 principles. Yeah, I think this is very important. So the first one is what is unacceptable offline should be unacceptable online. And the second one, all users should be empowered to manage online risk and stay safe. And the third one, technology companies have a responsibility to their users. And partnership with the industry is very important. This is also from the UK government. I only put the summary here. So the first one is get the technology support, engineering expertise to create a safer solution platform. So maybe the difference here with the Indonesian approach is that they try to create a safe internet while still encouraging productivity, innovation, and economic growth. So this is the top priority. So if there is something that is not secure, let's fix it with the collaboration of all stakeholders, while still pushing the productivity, innovation, and economy. So this, I think, very, very important and very interesting if we can implement this also in Indonesia. So they also develop a framework to be consistent, share best practice, agree to protect user. And the last one is collaboration to improve the skills and digital resilience of users to stay safe in conducting online activities. So I think that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Pak Tony, for your explanation about the cloud computing and also what's the risks and the potentials that entails. And we also see from the presentation that there's so many room for Indonesia to develop in terms of the capacity and also the partnership with other countries and also between the government and the private sectors in building this cloud computing. And for the next one, we also have the speakers who works with governments and stakeholders to accelerate economic growth and digital transformation across Asia. Yam Ki-chan covers policies related to economic impact, cybersecurity, technology risk management, artificial intelligence, and many others. Prior to his work in Google, Yam-Ki served as the director at the White House National Security Council and a member of the US Sherpa team for the G20 and G7 in the Obama administration. And also before the White House experiences, Yam-Ki was with the US Department of the Treasury Office of the US-China Strategic and Economic Dialogue and the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. With his extensive experiences in this government affairs and also technology sectors, we will be thrilled to have him talk more about the works that related to the cybersecurity and also cloud computing here in Asia, specifically with the Google Cloud. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Yam-Ki Chan.
Thank you, Bupinkan, for the kind introduction, and to Pak Anton, to Pak Tony, and to others on the call. Selamat pagi. It's an honor and a privilege to have you as an audience and to share with you some of our thinking around the issues of cybersecurity, which is, of course, a top of mind issue for a lot of governments as well as citizens around the world. And the recent developments around the COVID-19 pandemic has only highlighted the importance of technology in the economic growth, in making sure that people can work remotely and safely wherever they may be, and also to ensure that students are able to be educated even if they're not able to be in school. So I wish I could be there in person with you all. That's what I would normally do, travel to Jakarta and see you. But please forgive me for trying to do this remotely. So I'm going to go through a couple of topics, but I think here is what I'm trying to convince you by the end of this session. And I don't know if I'll be successful, but I will try. The first point that I'll try to convince you it's something that Pak Tony had talked about in the response from Kaspersky and from Liminet, which is that for most organizations, they're actually more secure on the public cloud than on-premise. And I'll go through some of the reason why from a Google Cloud perspective. The second piece is that security on the cloud, it's about control and transparency and not about location. And again, I'll shed a little light on how the technology can help with that. And then the third piece is that we can demonstrate the security and the trust through compliance with international standards, and share a bit what Google Cloud's approach is and some of the various standards you may look to if you're interested in using a cloud service provider. So from the Google Cloud perspective, security is a very complicated issue, and we try to break it down into three parts for our stakeholders. And these are the same things that we talk to the various policymakers about. The first part is around protection. What does the infrastructure and the hardware and software do to help prevent threats? The second part is security controls. What kind of controls do we have as the cloud service provider? What kind of controls does the customer have? And then thirdly, compliance. How do we demonstrate to you as a customer or to the policymaker that all of the controls and protections are really in place, that we essentially do what we say, as opposed to just saying what we do. So our approach at Google is something we call defense in depth. Essentially, what this does is that we look at security at each level of the stack, starting from infrastructure through deployment to identity, communication, and then to operational and device security. No system's perfect. The goal here is how do we minimize the attack surface, strengthen each of the systems, and then be able to detect something that's inconsistent and to be able to zoom in on that and address the problem. That's true whether you're on the cloud or you're on premise. One thing that you may not know is that Google Cloud deploys its systems in a different way. Every machine that we have in the system, we actually have a Google purpose-built cryptographic chip called Titan. The Titan chip, and you see it there, is actually embedded in a network card or in every single motherboard that we have for all of our systems. And it is a chip that detects very, very beginning, before or as the machine boots, that the basic firmware is the firmware that Google had assigned for that machine, that is not modified or different. And that's before the operating system or anything else gets built on it. This cryptographic signature also tracks with the various operating system and builds on that particular machine. So what we have from a very, very beginning is a very end-to-end solution around the trust of the machine, from the purpose-built chips to the purpose-built servers to purpose-built storage, networking, and the unique data centers that we have. All of that is put together through different parts of Google, so that no single vendor actually has a full visibility of how the machines come together. I talked about some of the networking that are unique. When you use a large hyperscale cloud provider like Google, you're not using just the data center that you choose. Part of what's behind that is the global network. So at Google, we actually invest in various cables around the world that carries traffic. And at Google, all information is encrypted at rest as well as in transit by default 100%. You cannot turn that off. So when you're using the Jakarta region, for example, which we just launched in June, and you may be processing information in Jakarta, sometimes you may want to process information in the United States because you're serving clients in that market. When that travels, it's traveling on our private network. It does not get exposed on the broad internet, or it minimizes that exposure until at the edge. So what it does is it gives greater speed, but also greater security to our cloud customers. As you see here, we have 24 regions globally. 4 of them are new this year. And each of the regions have 3 to 4 zones, giving high availability. One of the things I talked about was encryption, and this is really key to how modern security is built. And this is where it's important to understand that the location of the data actually doesn't matter. It's how you deal with that data. Traditionally, on-premise providers will have your data sit in a location, but that data may not be encrypted, or it may be encrypted with a key, but the key is easy to break. Or it may only encrypt a portion of the data, but not all the data. So because of the scale at which we're building, anything that enters the Google system is actually encrypted at rest and in transit. Think of it this way. Imagine a piece of information like a sheet of paper that comes into the network. Once it comes into Google, we break that into 100 pieces. Each of the shredded pieces is then encrypted with a key. And then that key is encrypted with a second key, then that's tied to the piece. And then we shard that across our servers. What that means is that even if someone were to break into a physical data center, which is pretty hard, and then they know which particular hard drive to pull, and then if they can pull the hard drive and decrypt that hard drive, and then they figure out, okay, within this hard drive block, this particular block is your data, they have to break 2 keys, one of which will take about 200 plus years to break. Now let's assume that they can even break those 2 keys. They would then only get 1/100th of that piece of information. They have to go and find the other 99 and go through the decryption process and break in the keys again. What this does is it essentially makes the data unreadable to the malicious actor. And this is key to a lot of how modern cloud computing is built. Google also provides a range of encryption key options. So on the far left of the screen, you will see encryption by default. This is what Google is built on. You cannot turn it off. Customers' keys are managed by us. We control the rotation of the key. Very easy to manage. You don't have to think about it. As you move further to the right, there's greater control for the customer. You can either have a hardware security module that we manage in our system. You can have a hardware security module that is in a co-location, which means it is located where our data center is. Or if you want, you can even have an external key manager where the key sits in your own on-premise system. And every time we make a request, we have to come and ask you for that key with a request of explanation why before you provide a key to us to decrypt the data, to process the data that you request. So essentially, this gives you greater control and greater options as you consider your security posture. Just last week, we had our Cloud Next event, which is our annual big event around cloud computing for Google. We announced confidential virtual machines. This is something that's new, it's in beta. And what it does is that Google already provides you encryption at rest and encryption in transit by default. With this additional option, you can even have encryption at processing at the virtual machine level. So this, for those who are very technical, you will be able to understand that this encryption is actually done on the chip, on the processor level, so that even if an administrator is trying to look into the processor at the time of processing, they're not able to do that. Pak Tony mentioned, I think, a number of things that were very, very helpful. One of those was 90+% of the problems around cyber incidents is actually due to social engineering. One of the ways that we try to address this is two-factor authentication that Pak Tony mentioned. At Google, all of our employees, including our contractors, has this built in across 100,000+ employees and another set of contractors as well. For us and for the customers of ours who use two-factor authentication, they've had a 0 successful reported phishing incident, which is a pretty significant number when you think about how large Google is, but also all the customers that we serve that are using and deploying the service. So this, by the way, can use not just with Google Cloud and with Google, but some of the other providers such as Facebook, Twitter, can provide you this option in terms of managing and protecting your account. And it's something that we highly encourage as passwords become less and less secure over time. The second piece of this is about control. How do you make sure that you have control over your data? Pak Tony had shared a graph similar to this around the shared responsibility model on what portion a service provider like Google Cloud would manage and what portion the customer would manage. And you see again that on the on-premise system, the customer will have to manage everything, whereas as you get into infrastructure as a service, platforms as a service, and software as a service, a greater portion of that is taken on by Google Cloud or the cloud provider, and we are responsible for protecting the security of that system. What that does is that it relieves the stress and the requirement on the customer. It actually makes them and help them focus on the key part as opposed to some of the hardware part that may be more complicated to handle. This is a quick chart to just highlight our framework with some of the products that we offer that touches on infrastructure security, network security, data security, application security, as well as the governance and security and monitoring that you may need as a security provider or as an administrator. An interesting product I want to point out is around the use of AI for data protection. So traditionally, customers or businesses are sitting on a lot of data, but they actually don't know what's in it and what part of it may contain PII or may be sensitive. What we've done is we've taken AI machine learning and applied that to data that the customer maintains, whether that is in a text file, in a database, or even in pictures and images. Imagine taking a picture of your ID card. What this can do is use AI to identify PII, like names, location, dates, passport numbers, ID number, or unique classifiers that you may have for your data set. What it does is also does a set of transformation. So on the case on the far left, this could be scrambling an ID so that before it leaves or touches someone outside the system, the ID is scrambled. It could transform. It can take titles and simplify them so that you don't get the actual full title, but maybe perhaps in a grouping, so you can still do some level of analysis with it. You can mask. So a phone number, you may get the first 3 digits, but mask the rest. Or you can actually mask it with what it found. So you know what type of information is being masked, but it doesn't actually give you what that may be. So what this does is that you can have this before data enters into the cloud system, or as it moves in the cloud system, or before it leaves the cloud system. So in this scenario, a particular administrator may be opening access to a cloud data bucket, but before the data actually leaves, even if there was a malicious actor, it would have to go through the scan and it would go through the masking, therefore protecting the data, or you can have it quarantined separately before it leaves the network. Pak Tony mentioned the importance of catching misconfigurations. This is something that we feel we can help our customers with, that even in a shared responsibility model, it doesn't mean that the customer is on their own. So we have services like the Cloud Security Command Center that actually look across the customer's deployment on the system and be able to identify different things that they may need to think about. One of those is a service called Security Health Analytics that looks at different types of misconfiguration, breaks it down by severity, does a benchmark, and then asks the administrator whether or not certain actions they would need to take. This would cover, in general, 6 buckets of areas. That could be storage, where there are publicly exposed buckets, networking, where firewall rules are not very tight, various logging controls. Perhaps somebody turned off monitoring or turned off logging, that would be flagged. VM instances, if there are various private cloud API access that's not enabled, that they're having this public access, this is something that would be flagged in the system, with containers, as well as tracking for various benchmarks. Lastly, I want to touch on compliance. As I mentioned at the very beginning, when a cloud provider how does a cloud provider demonstrate to you that we have certain security controls? A big part of that is to do compliance offerings. On the far left are the ones that we offer that are at a global level. That will be the various ISOs, 27000 series that a lot of countries actually create together, as well as the SOC 1, 2, and 3 reports that are available to customers and auditors if needed. In the case of Asia, there are various standards, including in Singapore, the MTCS that we have complied with or attest to, and those attestation reports are available to customers under an NDA. So this is where my discussion will end, but I hope it gives you a sense of how we look at security on the cloud from a protection perspective, from a control perspective, and then from a compliance perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yamki, for the explanation. That's really clear. And we also know that there are so many features in the cloud computing, especially from Google, that, as you mentioned also, that has been launched earlier this month in Indonesia. And we can also see the correlation between the vulnerable risk that already presented by Pak Tony to be more in practical ways from your presentation. So it really helps us to figure out about the condition in cloud computing and what are the concerning issues. And after we hear all of the presentation from our speakers, now we are going to move to the question and answer session. So before I pick up the question that coming from our audiences, I also would like to give a question first for all of the panelists here. So in your perspective, and also based on the experiences, what are the most important principles that should be included in the upcoming cybersecurity bill concerning the growing businesses that range from many sectors that moving to the cloud computing from the on-premise one. So what kind of key principles that might be addressed in the bill? Because aside from the cybersecurity bill, we also have data protection bill that is ongoing. So perhaps what could be addressed specifically for that? So perhaps we can start from Pak Anton.
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Pinkan. To respond this, I already stated that cyberspace, cybersecurity is formed and run by various parties with various interests in the cyberspace. So it's running collectively. So for this reason, I need to emphasize that the task of protecting national cyberspace will succeed if there is a synergy and collaboration from all parties, from the industry, or the academy, from the private sector, and also PSSN, according to the presidential mandate, are responsible to ensuring that this synergy and collaboration can be realized in Indonesia. As example, we already have a 8 initiative that all the parties can make contributed to each of the 8 initiative already published by BSSN. That's my response, Pinkan.
Thank you, Pak. The next one from Pak Tony.
Okay, I fully agree with Pak Anton. Yeah, so the cybersecurity cannot be solved by one agency only, and I expect in the future cybersecurity and safety bill, it will prioritize on the collaboration with the multiple stakeholder. And first of all, the law must be in line or must be with the existing electronic and transaction information law. And then if we have the personal data protection law published, yeah, then it must be aligned too with that, since this have tight relationship with these laws. And then promote the collaboration with the multiple stakeholder. Maybe in that law we can also state more detail who is the multiple stakeholder, who is the responsible for what, and who is the accountable party, and who should be consulted and who should be informed. So this is the RACI framework. And the most important thing that I didn't see in the past draft is the collaboration with the technology owner. So maybe Pak Anton also mentioned about that, but I would like to have that state in the future regulation, because technology owner is the one that own the technology and they know the direction, and they have the tools. They have the tools to detect, to protect, to do everything with the technology. And the last one is leverage the citizen. So educate the citizen, increase the IT level understanding, IT literacy must be increased. So it means that if I know about IT, I can teach other people about IT too. If my daughter knows about IT because she's very young, she knows a little about IT, she can also teach other people in children language, something like that. So there are several movement around this, or maybe in the next bill can also touch about this. So maybe we can leverage all the citizen to increase the IT literacy. And yeah, I think that's all. If this can be accommodated in the next bill, I will be very happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Tony. And for the last one from Yamki, Chan.
Thank you for the question. I would say 3 things. The first is compliance with international standards. So as I mentioned in my last slide, there are various international standards through the ISO, and it's important to track those and be in compliant because it minimizes the cost for not just the cloud provider, but actually for the customer. So think of all the banks and large businesses that are operating globally. To the extent that they are operating on a consistent standard that's harmonized, it actually makes it easier for them to have one thing to manage as opposed to 4 or 5 different systems or different standards to manage. The second piece is talent, which both Pak Tony and Pak Anton talked about. And here, I think there is a need for programs to upskill the various IT professionals within Indonesia. And there are probably exchange programs that could be done either with the private sector or with other governments through a capacity building programs. We run some of these for policymakers as well, so that they can ask questions and understand how the security work in our system. I think that's very important. The third piece is, I think, making it clear that there is cross-border data flow is actually supported. There's no requirement for data residency. And that's important because I think, number one, as I've said during the presentation, data residency does not address security. Number two, to use some of the latest technology, such as AI, it requires processing by computers at a global level. So if you don't have the ability to move data around, you actually cannot take advantage of some of these capabilities to innovate and leapfrog. And then number three, a lot of the regional agreements now are recognizing cross-border data flow as a key part for the digital economy. The recent Singapore-Australia Digital Economy Program or Digital Economy Protection Act, as well as the Trade Act, as well as the new one that will be negotiated with, I think, Chile and other countries. So I think that is quite important to recognize.
Thank you, Yamki, for the answers and also all the speakers. So we are going forward for the next questions coming from our audiences. The first one coming from Arinda Nityasari from the Institute of International Studies at Universitas Gadjah Mada. So the question is for all panelists. I think for the how important is it to cooperate in international level in regards to cybersecurity collaboration, and what are the challenges? And specifically for Pak Anton, how is the future of Indonesian cyber diplomacy on cybersecurity? Yeah, I think that's all the first question that we would like to throw. Perhaps Pak Anton could answer first.
Okay, thank you, Fincan. One of our pillar to protect our national interest is cyber diplomacy. It is we already involved with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the others government entity from bilateral, regional, or multilateral event. We collaborate with them to talk about a lot of issue in the area of the cybersecurity, in the area of the cyberspace. For example, we do hot discussion with the UNGGI norm of cybersecurity, already proposed by several countries, but not yet. We have to make a recommendation or accepted for this norm. Also in ASEAN, we have about 5 level of committee or ministerial meeting forum about cybersecurity, about digital economy, about cybercrime. We also Indonesia actively to bring the value. As example, last week we have a ministerial meeting in digital economy task force. We bring the value of Indonesia value to the how to develop the artificial intelligence, who respected from the for the human right, for the technological free, for the independent access, something like that. Biasanya Indonesia collaborate with the other entities involved and contributed to the international forum.
Thank you, Pak Anton. And for Pak Tony, next. Repeat the question.
No need.
Okay.
So I will answer the question about how important is it to collaborate in the international level. So I think it is very important, since cybersecurity is a global priority. It happens everywhere, not only in Indonesia. And also the cost of the cybercrime to individual is increasing. So I believe in the last report, the annual cost is around 114 billion US dollar for the cybercrime in individual. But there is some problem with the collaboration in the global collaboration, for example, we don't have the standard of the framework. How do we collaborate? We don't have the formal institution and the procedure. So actually, there are a lot of organizations that is also interested in cybersecurity, something like ITU, Apakah, and NISA. So maybe we can start to talk with this organization how we can develop the cybersecurity framework and yeah, for the benefit for us, for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Tony. And from Yamki-chan?
Thank you for the question. This is an interesting one, especially because I used to work in a G20 process for the US back in 2016 when we actually introduced some of the cybersecurity topic, in part because of state-to-state issues around cybersecurity. And I think we have to be honest here that right now, multilateral collaboration is a challenge because of geopolitical tensions at the broader level. And that doesn't look like it's going to change in the near term. I do think that it's helpful to have this conversations through the G20, through the ITU and APAC, and do it in a way that's multi-stakeholder, such that it's not only government bodies, but also be it private institutions and NGOs can be at the table and really work through the challenges. But these are hard conversations. So what, as a company, we've done is we are essentially democratizing some of that security capability. So in the absence of collaboration per se, there are still technology that's being made available to countries that may not have that advanced technology on their own. So things that I mentioned around encryption that we can do by default, that's actually hard to do for a lot of companies. This is democratized because we have the capability now to do it in region in Indonesia for Indonesian businesses, and they can do it, you know, with a click of a button without having to build a lot of complicated system. So that's the strategy that we're thinking about, and I think it's important for government and policymakers to think about how their businesses, their top organizations, are having access to this sort of technology and services.
Okay, thank you so much for all the panelists' answers to the questions. That's very interesting. And we also have another questions coming from Caroline Pratama. This question specifically addressed to Pak Anton. So what do you think will incentivize collaboration between ministries or agencies, as well as other stakeholders, on putting the legal frameworks and other infrastructure needed for cybersecurity? Has there been any discussion on such strategies in BSSN?
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Pinkan, for the question. Among the government entity, we already have a cybersecurity forum. We regularly have a discussion talking about the recent issue about the cybersecurity. Also, we prepare to forming information sharing and analysis center. This is like the best practice from the others country already implemented, how to respond, how to make a mitigation about the cyber incident. Also, we're talking about how the best practice to implement the cybersecurity framework among us, and also we are talking yes about the policy, about the law, about the draft of the bill of cybersecurity law. We also make open communication also with our friend from the academic, from the public and the private sector, for the communities to join with us, to contribute it, to have some good suggestion about the next policy in the Indonesia cyberspace.
Thank you so much, Pak Anton, for the response to this question. And now we are going to have the last questions, and this is addressed to all the panelists. So it's coming from Joshua to all the panelists. So the question is, despite of sophisticated security on the user side, the weakness on one of the case in Indonesia data leak is the data manager, which doesn't apply multiple cybersecurity layer. So the first question, who are the party which are the most responsible in this kind of problems, excluding the user as a victim? And the second question, how should a government act, whether in lawmaking or in law enforcement, to protect their citizens? So perhaps we can go to Pak Anton first.
Yeah, we already have Undang-Undang ITE. This is the root of the law that to explain about who responsible for the electronic transaction. There is a various entity who responsible depending on the area of the issue or of the problem raised by the issue. I think the issue of the risk. If we talking about financial, we have BI and OJK. If we have about the content, we can talk with the Kominfo. If we have a problem with the cybersecurity, we talk with the BSSN. If we have the cybercrime, we talk about with the Polri. Yeah, there is a various of entity organization who responsible for the digital issue. So we just follow the Undang-Undang ITE and also follow the government decree 71 2019 PP PSTE. This is the guidance for us to solve the problem in the area of digital in Indonesia. This is my response.
Thank you, Pak Anton. So for the next one, I think we can hear from Pak Tony, because you also mentioned an interesting global or international examples from the UK. So perhaps is there any other things that could be addressed related to this question?
Okay, the one that is responsible, actually there are several parties that held the responsibilities. Yeah, the first one actually the user or the victim. If we cannot mention the victim, then maybe the other one is the provider of the service. The provider must follow the regulation in Indonesia and must follow the regulators. So there are regulation in Indonesia. For example, in terms of security, the provider must have the ISO 27000 series. Now, the question is, if the provider does not use, doesn't have the ISO 27000 series, what the government do? So maybe this is a question about the enforcement. So I think in Indonesia, the enforcement is not that strong. So I believe if the government have a very strong enforcement regarding the standardization, the security standard, the e-commerce, the fintech in Indonesia will be more safer. So for example, by implementing the ISO 27001, 27017, 27018, it ensures that the security is having their own standard, and also the PII of the customer also protected, and also the information is secure when it is processed in the cloud. The people also, the understanding of the ISO 27001 is also not very good in Indonesia. For example, if one organization already have 27001, then maybe the next question, what kind of service is certified with that standard? Is it only the infrastructure, or maybe the e-commerce, or the other thing? And how about the PII? Because the 27001 doesn't really handle the PII. PII must be handled by another standard, for example, 27018, and if the provider is using cloud, then it must comply with the 27017. And if there is some financial transaction, maybe the provider must comply with PCI DSS. So those are the standards that the provider must comply. Now, who is the most responsible one? Maybe the government already have the regulation, but how about the penalty? If the organization doesn't comply with those standards, what is the penalty? So I think the enforcement must be stronger. So yeah, I think that's my response. So the standard is very critical in Indonesia right now. We only have SNI ISO 27001, but we haven't adopted other standard, the 77017, 77018, and the others. So we must have a better understanding about the standard in Indonesia, and it's applied to the government or the institution. So usually, if we are talking about the standard, the global standard is higher than the local standard. So if we don't have the Indonesian national standard, we should comply to the global one. And in Indonesia, maybe the thinking is slightly reverse. Yeah? So we value the SNI higher than the global standard. But since the adoption of the standard is slow, so I think it's better right now to see the global standard as the higher standard than the local, especially related to the cybersecurity.
Thank you so
I
much,
hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, and for the last one from Yamki, because at the last of your presentation, you also showcase so many experiences from other countries. So perhaps you can highlight some of them that could be developed more in terms of the regulation for Indonesia.
Thank you. And I think I really align with both Pak Anton and Pak Tony on this. There are these international standards that are actually quite good, and they are a multi-stakeholder process, meaning there's a whole process that brings together various parts to actually improve them over time so that they're consistent and harmonized. Pak Tony rightly mentioned 27001, 017, and 018, all of which major cloud providers already attest to. We do definitely at Google Cloud. I think there's a question here of how do you think about the capacity of the government and the capacity of the institution and the user. And this is something that maybe we can bring in a concept from the privacy approach, which is around data controller and data processor. And it's important to understand the difference because data controller are the owners of the data. Right? So usually the data controllers are the ones that are directly impacted by the law because they're essentially the ones who have full control over the data. Data processors are organizations that are processing on behalf of the controller. So in the case of cloud, we are the processor. Oftentimes, we actually don't even have visibility into what the data is. We not know what it is, especially if they're using things around encryption, like they hold their own encryption key. So we, as the processor, are processing the data. There are obligations on us if we have data leaks to the controllers that are contractual, that are based on the legal agreement between us and the company, whether that's the bank or that could be the government, if the government is the customer, or a logistics company. And usually if there are any data breaches in the law, in the legal agreement, there is X amount of time where we have to provide an analysis and an update to the customer. And then if there are penalties included in that, we'll have to either compensate the customer in some way in that instance. And of course, the customer, the enterprise customer, then is accountable to the user or to the government if there are laws that apply to them. But it's important to understand that the law should apply to the data controller and not necessarily the processor.
Thank you so much for all of the speakers' answers and also the audience's questions. We are sorry for the time because we took longer than we are planning, but we are really grateful for the active participation and enthusiasm towards this webinar. And we found out that it's really interesting issues that really relevant with our situation right now. And if I may sum up 3 key points that really important that I gain from all of the speakers, there's the need for co-regulation and also coordination and the better enforcement to have a strong cybersecurity, and especially to developing more for the cloud computing in terms of the cybersecurity. So without further ado, I also would like to thank everyone and giving back to our MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Pinkan. And thank you once again to our wonderful panelists who have shared some really valuable perspectives here on the issue of cloud security. As Pinkan briefly mentioned as well, indeed, as more enterprises of all sizes start moving to adopt cloud storage for operational efficiency and cost effectiveness, and on the individual consumer level as well for personal use, cloud security is indeed a space that we should all remain alert on. So if you want to continue these excellent discussions so far with fellow conference attendees, we encourage also our panelists to join this as well. Please log into our virtual discussion and networking room using the Slack platform, and you will see there on the screen more information about it. We will actually be ending Digital Week this afternoon at 3 p.m. Jakarta time with the last set of sessions. These sessions will also have 2 breakout sessions. The first breakout room will be on enabling e-payments in Indonesia through shared infrastructure. We'll have the pleasure to discuss the topic of e-payments with panelists from Bank Indonesia, Mojaluk Foundation, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This session will be in English, and again, like today, we'll have interpretation in Bahasa. For the second breakout room, it will be on e-signature, masa depan dari sebuah kontrak, or the future of contracts. We'll be joined by Privy ID and law firm Makes and Partners, who will take us through their views on the future of e-signatures and contracts. This section will be in Bahasa. So if you haven't already, please sign up for this last session through the link provided by my colleague here. And thank you again. Thank you everyone again. I hope you enjoy your lunch break. And for those going for Friday prayers, selamat salat Jumat. See you all again at 3 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone, Pak Tony, Mr. Chan. See you next.
Thank you, Pak Anton. Thank you, everyone.
Terima kasih,
Bye.
Mbak Pinkan, Mbak Antia. Terima kasih. Izin pamit.